The divine palm appeared. Genre, ancient swordplay. Author, unknown. After listening, please comment on your feelings, and don't forget to subscribe to listen to the latest episode. Episode 4. Chapter 18. Wuxia Tam Kui. Lutsongchao Mountain is located in the west of Yunnan Province. The mountain range stretches far and wide. The forest is full of miasma, raging wild animals, and countless poisonous snakes, so few people go there. Early that morning, a figure rushed like lightning and reached the foot of the mountain. Just pondering for a moment, that person then headed straight towards the top of the mountain. That figure is Dang Kim Fai. He did not care to come thousands of miles away to find Doc Long Tu for help. Even though he was severely poisoned, his powers remained undiminished, thanks to the fire cloud ring given to him by Bitch Fong Tan Nan, and his discreet disguise. Therefore, within just 1 month, he went from a foreign official to the southwest, up to Chao Lutsong. But where is Doc Long Lagoon? He searched and still couldn't find it. As he walked, he thought to himself, Bok Doc Mon's base is located in Chao Lukang. Let's go there first and ask, maybe they know the whereabouts of Doc Long Lagoon. At that time, the sun had just risen, the air was indescribably fresh. He was walking along the top of the mountain when he suddenly heard a howl echoing from deep in the mountain. Immediately after that, he saw 3 figures as fast as lightning rushing down from the top of the mountain, heading straight into a valley. He silently marveled. The skills of these 3 people are so profound. Is it possible that there are still experts in seclusion in the mountain? After thinking about it, he immediately used the long Van Don body technique, chased after the 3 people, and headed straight towards the valley. The lower you go, the more bumpy the road becomes. Especially when entering Kok Khao, jagged cat-eared stones are everywhere, with strange shapes, but none of them can hinder Kim Fai's footsteps. Just arriving at Kok Khao, he suddenly saw to the southwest, under a cliff, a figure briefly appeared and then disappeared. He immediately flew after him. When he was more than 10 meters away from the cliff, suddenly a faint laugh rang out from behind the mountain. Right after that, 3 people with cruel faces and cold expressions, wearing yellow shirts, suddenly appeared a few meters away from him. The person standing in the middle coldly shouted, "You there!" According to others, you also have to consider who your target is before you should follow. If these giants didn't have something to do today, your life would have been destroyed long ago. Kim Fai saw that the 3 people looked very similar and looked extremely arrogant, so he coldly replied, "Everyone has their own thing. This mountain valley is not your property, so why do you have the right to forbid me from setting foot there?" The big man standing in the middle suddenly laughed. His strange laughter lasted for a long time before saying, "If you say so, you will die today." As soon as he finished speaking, the big man on the left raised his palms. A cold wind immediately rushed straight towards Kim Fai, and shouted loudly, "Today, Wuxia Tam Kui will take you to visit the King of Hell." He shouted while swinging his palm forward, aiming straight at the major acupuncture points on Kim Fai's body. Hearing the other person call himself Wuxia Tam Kui, Kim Fai's face changed slightly. He hesitated a bit, then the wind attacked him. He quickly sidestepped, bowed low and spun around. His left hand waved quickly, hitting the opponent's 5 great acupuncture points. The right hand curls up like an iron hook, grabbing the opponent's left wrist. Both legs simultaneously launched 14 consecutive kicks. That great man is Keet Fach Kui Tran Kai, the youngest brother of Wuxia Tam Kui. He originally thought that just 1 move would be enough to knock out the opponent, causing the opponent to cry out and die on the spot. Who would have thought that Kim Fai not only avoided the attack, but also counterattacked fiercely in the blink of an eye? Although Tran Kai was frightened, his hands were not ordinary. He immediately withdrew his hand from Kim Fai's hand and jumped out. At the same time, the boss Le Ghost Phuong Tien and the second old Ghost Vu Kim simultaneously waved their palms and attacked Kim Fai repeatedly. Wuxia Tam Kui resides in Luk Tien Mountain, is the 3 great disciples of Wuxia Ma Quan, whose reputation has been resounding in martial arts for a long time. The martial arts of all 3 are strong, their actions are cruel, every time they fight they attack at the same time. Their power is extremely terrifying. Kim Fi was forced to dodge, then used Long Feng's strong energy, turned around, raised his two palms to attack the boss and second boss. Tran Kai stepped back, suddenly launched himself high, howled, then dropped a palm from above, aiming straight at the top of Kim Fi's head. Kim Fi used all his strength to resist Tam Kui's attack. As soon as his palm touched the opponent's palm, he felt his whole body vibrate violently, his legs became unsteady. He had to take 6 consecutive steps back to barely maintain his balance. Fuang Tian smiled faintly and shouted loudly, "Little devil, quickly surrender your life." Having finished speaking, he waved his palm and rushed in to attack continuously, while Vu Kim and Tran Kai immediately attacked from both sides. Kim Fi also smiled faintly, his body flickered, he rushed straight into the middle of the layers of Ghost Shadow Palm Wind, and at the same time used Dragon Phoenix Double Palm in combination with White Bone Absolute Min Tam Assassin to counterattack fiercely. The death battle took place extremely fiercely. In just a moment, the surrounding rocks were crushed by the force of 4 people's palms. The 4's body movements were as fast as lightning, and in an instant they fought for more than 50 rounds. Kim Fi had heard about Wuxia Tam Kui's fierce name for a long time, but now that they directly fought, they saw that their martial arts skills were truly extraordinary. Being besieged for less than 100 rounds, he felt a clear decline in his true strength, with only the ability to resist rather than counterattack. If he wasn't poisoned and his internal energy wasn't lost, who would Wuxia Tam Kui be strong enough to fight against? But the situation now was completely different. Not only did he have a poisonous poison in his body that reduced his physical strength by nearly half, but Nam Doc's 2 veins could not be connected, and his true energy did not function as desired. On the one hand, he performed Dragon Feng Song Tuet Chuang combined with White Bone Tuet Min Tam Assassin. On the other hand, he silently searched for a way to escape. Just a little distracted, the pressure from all 4 directions immediately increased fiercely. Fuang Tian let out a scream, jumped more than 2 feet high, flipped around, then spread out 10 fingers and grabbed the top of Kim Fi's head. Vu Kim and Tran Kai simultaneously attacked his major acupoints from left and right. Kim Fi was frightened, only to see the pressure on all sides as heavy as a mountain, cold air penetrating the bones. The enemy's palm wind was coming as fast as electricity. He quickly used all his strength to use Long Feng's spirit and used the Dry Cot Han Sun position to defend. At the same time, he turned his hand to pull out the Kim Hug Divine Sword and immediately deployed the Kim Long First Tang position in the Fantasy Tien Sword counterattack. A brilliant golden light burst from his body, and then there was a loud cry, "Kim Hug Divine Sword!" As soon as the scream ended, the golden light had just gone out, then a pitiful scream rang out, and fresh blood gushed out like a stream. Wuxia Tam Kui still stood on 3 sides, surrounding Kim Fi, but at that time Vu Kim's right arm had been severed. Even though he had time to point at the weak point to stop the bleeding, streams of red blood still continued to drip onto the ground. When Tran Kai and Fuang Tian saw that Vu Kim was injured, they were extremely angry. They immediately used their palms to attack Kim Fi, and at the same time performed Wuxia Sun's 5 Poison Lotus Claw technique. The 5 Poison Lotus Claw was originally the famous weapon of Wuxia Ma Quan in the past, about 8 meters long. On the chain are full of automatic hooks. At the end of the chain is a black ghost hand. The nails are soaked in poison. If you are scratched, you will lose your life in less than half a day. Extremely domineering. In the past, many famous gangsters died under this weapon. This time, Wuxia Tam Kui had just unleashed his amazing skill, and immediately a cold wind rolled in. A strong fishy smell flooded in, making people feel nauseous just by smelling it. The momentum was amazing. Kim Fi didn't say a word. He immediately used Tien Long Dao Tien sword to counterattack. Golden sword light poured out from the divine sword in continuous, endless waves. The battle became more and more intense. Gradually, in the valley, only 2 shadows of black light could be seen swirling around a golden light. The fierce wind caused by the collision of three beams of light spread in all directions, with unfathomable power. Wuxia took out 2 pills from his body and swallowed them. He sat cross-legged to control his breathing, trying to restore his lost vitality. In the 72nd round, a clattering sound suddenly rang out. Wuxia jumped out, retreated in the blink of an eye, and at the same time threw a cloud of stinky black water towards Kim Fai's head. Keep Fatch Ghost Tran Kai circled around Kim Fai's back, quickly raised his right hand and swung the 5 poison lotus claw to strike straight at the back of his heart. At the same time, he raised his left hand and threw it hard. 5 streams of black energy immediately shot out. It turns out that since leaving Lang Hukak, Kim Fai's sword technique Sword Dragon takes the destiny of fantasy heaven has improved significantly. In the 72nd round, Fuang Tian intended to use the 100 Dak Tru Vong position to hit his shoulders. Kim Fai immediately changed his move and performed Kim Long Tho Lu. The tip of the sword stabbed back into Fuang Tian's chest and abdomen. Fuang Tian was frightened and quickly threw Ling Tu Claw to hook Kim Fai's right arm. Kim Fai's sword moves are inherently vain. Seeing that the opponent had been tricked, he put all his true force into the Kim Huthan sword. Without advancing, he reversed the tip of the sword and stabbed it upwards. At the same time, his left hand counterattacked a move, forcing back Tran Kai's attack from the left side. But Fuang Tian is not ordinary. His lotus claw was inherently filled with deadly poison. Seeing Kim Fai thrust his sword upward, he secretly rejoiced, and Tran Kai immediately circled behind him. The 2 weapons collided, making a bang sound. Fuang Tian's lotus claw was cut in half. Wuxia shook his hand vigorously. From the broken claw he immediately sprayed out a jet of dark poisonous water. At the same time, Tran Kai used his attack to be extremely fierce. Everything happened so fast it was unbelievable. In front of him was poisonous water spraying, behind him was Tran Kai's lotus claw coming, Kim Fai's sword was raised high again. Everyone thought that this time it would be difficult for him to escape disaster. Suddenly, Kim Fai shouted loudly, using all his strength to use Long Feng's energy. His left hand pulled out the Tai Ma Fan's Fien Ma's old token and held it behind him to block the attack. At the same time, he rotated the Kim Huthan sword and slashed straight at Tran Kai, taking advantage of the situation to jump diagonally to the side. Immediately afterwards, a pitiful cry rang out. Kim Fai's face turned pale, and his body slid more than 7 meters out. Tran Kai staggered back 6 steps, opened his mouth and spit out a mouthful of fresh blood. Fuang Tian smiled faintly and said, "Very good. It's not too late to pay this debt next time." Before he could look closely at Kim Fai's face, he quickly helped Wuxia up and said to Tran Kai, "Let's go. One is that our side has suffered heavy losses today. Continuing to fight will only be at a disadvantage. Second, when he saw Kim Fai holding the Tai Ma Fan, he was secretly frightened, so he decided to retreat. Although Kim Fai dodged very quickly, his clothes were still splashed with a few drops of black poisonous water. In addition, using all his strength to confront Keep Fatch Ghost, the inner palace was shaken violently, making his injuries even more severe. He tried to suppress his anger, forced down his boiling blood, and coldly glanced at Fuang Tian. At this time, the place where the poisonous water was hit was hot. Pain gradually spread throughout his body, and flowers appeared before his eyes like fireflies. Kim Fai knew that if he let go of his true energy, he would vomit blood and faint, so he did not dare open his mouth to answer. Tran Kai took a breath before standing firmly, glanced at Kim Fai with resentful eyes, and said in a hoarse voice, "Dude, your martial arts skills are truly sublime. But we absolutely will not forget this debt. Sooner or later one day we will pay it off." Having finished speaking, Tran Kai followed Fuang Tian and Wuxia to leave. Waiting for the demons to disappear, Kim Fai slowly put the Kim Huthan sword into its sheath, put the Tai Ma Fan in her pocket, then took the antidote given by Bitch Fong Tan Nan and swallowed it. The blood in his body had just calmed down, but his whole body was exhausted, and his strength seemed to be exhausted. Afraid of collapsing in the wilderness and no one would save him, he had no choice but to force himself step by step, following the mountainside behind him. The places that were hit by the poisonous water were painful to the bone. His mind was dizzy, his body felt exhausted, his steps staggered as if he were floating on clouds. It wasn't until a while later that he approached the mountainside and heard the sound of gurgling water. Rounding the mountain waste, he saw a large river below, with fast-flowing water and high waves. Kim Fi lowered his head and looked down, his mind became even more dizzy. He quickly turned around and suddenly heard a faint laugh behind him. "Kid, when you die, don't blame him for being cruel." A cold wind came. Kim Fi turned around in bewilderment, only to see Luqui Fuang Tian standing behind him, about 5 meters away with a fierce face. Immediately afterwards, a bone-chilling blast of cold wind approached. At this point, he had absolutely no power to resist, only reluctantly leaning to the left to avoid it. The bang sound rang out. Kim Fi felt like he was hit by a 1,000-pound iron hammer, fresh blood spurted out of his mouth, and his body flew backwards. In a daze, he only felt his body falling straight down, and Fuang Tian's crazy laughter still echoed in his ears. "Boy, who told you to dare to fight against Thiat Hong Bang?" Next was a fierce bang sound. Kim Fi fell into the rolling water, swept away by large waves and disappeared. Fuang Tian stood on the mountainside by the river, still laughing. His laughter mixed with the roar of the water, like a dark, creepy, and mournful dirge. Chapter 19. Mysterious Bitch Van Cave. Kim Fi was seriously injured and was hit by a powerful palm from Luqui Fuang Tian. His body fell straight into the river, carried away by the current. The cold water made him gradually awake. If it were normal times, even if the water waves were 100 times stronger, it wouldn't be difficult for him. But at this time his injury was serious, his true energy was exhausted, he couldn't even hold his breath. Cold river water continuously poured into his mouth and nose, his chest was suffocated, as if he was being pressed by a heavy object. Finally, he fell unconscious. Not knowing how long he drifted, he slowly opened his eyes, thinking that his soul had left his body, floating in the middle of nowhere. Absolute silence all around, a feeling of loneliness rising, but he still couldn't breathe, his chest and abdomen were full, extremely uncomfortable. Suddenly, a weak point across the back ached, and the body shook violently. It turned out that he hit a large rock, causing his consciousness to awaken. He tried to take a breath, but his mouth and nose were full of water, making breathing extremely difficult. At that moment, a strong whirlpool suddenly swept him to the bottom of the river. His body was stunned, spinning like a pinwheel. At the bottom of the river there was a large stream of water. The whirlpool pulled him deep inside, causing him to fall into a coma. This time, he knew it would be difficult to escape death, because his stomach was full of water. Fortunately, thanks to the previous use of 1,000-year Lord Ginseng and Lingji horse, the new vitality has not been cut off. Not long after, he gradually regained consciousness, feeling his stomach bulging, his body floating on a dark stream of water. All sides were pitch black. The water flowed slowly but seemed to never end. It turned out that this was an underground water vein in the mountain at the bottom of the river, so Kim Fi was drawn to this place. All sides are dark cliffs, water flows quietly. He lay still on the water surface, unable to move, letting the water carry him away. Finally, the body got stuck on a rock in the middle of the stream and stopped there. The surrounding was absolutely quiet, not a single sound. Even his own weak breathing he could hear clearly. This is a deep mountain bed. No matter day or night it is pitch black. No matter the season it is always the same warm. I don't know how much time had passed when suddenly there was a heavy sigh. Kim Fi slowly opened his eyes. At this time, his mind had recovered, but his strength was still extremely weak. He gently closed his eyes again, because he was so tired that he no longer had enough strength to even let out a sigh. Even so, he knew he had not yet lost all his vitality. After a while, his strength gradually recovered a little. He thought to himself, "Could it be that I am dead?" The reason he thought so was because the surroundings were so lonely and terrifyingly quiet. He thought only the underworld was so quiet. Strangely, at this moment, his body's pain was significantly less. My thoughts immediately turned to Master Bak Kat Then Quan, sworn brother and loyal father of Fien Ma. A moment later, he thought of Thuan Quan Lo Chao, the daughter of Thuan Quan Bao Bao. Even though she was the child of an evil tycoon, she still had feelings for him. Then he thought of Tran Du Du, Tran Tin's daughter, who also had deep feelings for him. Only Lai Hong, that bitch, made him angry, because she was still attached to young Master De Sun. Thinking of that, he muttered, "Huh. That vile girl said I was the enemy of her master, but she fell in love with me." Little did he know that if he had responded to Lai Hong's feelings, he would not have created so many troubles. But whether it was Thuan Quan Bao or Black Sat Trang, all were his enemies. He still has to avenge his master. If it weren't for the Thiat Hong gang, why would he have been dropped into the water like this? Thinking so, murderous intent rose in his heart. Sooner or later we will leave this place. At that time, today's debt will be repaid many times over. Luke Thu Three Ghosts, no matter how famous or capable you are, as long as you are a member of the Thiat Hong gang, I will not forgive you. As soon as his will rose, he suddenly came to his senses. His martial arts skills are almost gone, his body is seriously injured, he still has difficulty moving. What can he say about revenge? Even about my own background, I have no hope of finding out. Thinking about that, he couldn't hold back his tears and silently flowed out. He moved his body slightly, and immediately his whole body ached as if he had been bitten by a poisonous snake. In the body, only a thin stream of true energy remains, slowly circulating through the meridians. He tried his best to move that flow of true energy around his body, gradually feeling his strength begin to recover. But then streams of cold air rose from the bottom of the water, causing King Phi to shiver, his teeth chattering. Before long, the whole body's arms and legs were shaking like that. The strange thing is, wherever the cold spreads, the strength recovers quickly. After a while, he felt strong enough to stand up. He slowly stood up, looked around, and saw a fairly wide and flat rock behind him. When I first woke up, everything was pitch black. I couldn't see anything clearly. Now, thanks to the aura of the Ginseng Lord and Lin Chi horse, his eyesight is clear, looking around as if it were daytime. The flat rock was about 8 meters high, hiding behind him, making it impossible for him to see through. He slowly approached. Although his limbs were incredibly tired, the coldness from before had completely disappeared. He dried his clothes and hair, then used all his strength to climb up that rock. He closed his eyes, bowed his head, took a deep breath, then opened his eyes to look and saw a few words engraved on the stone surface. "Allow me to call you my friend. I'm inherently a loner and like quiet. If you also have that hobby, or are willing to accept me as your friend, please take 3 steps to the right. On the ground there is a small circle. Open it, your breath will return to normal, then let's talk." The words carved about 3 inches deep made him both terrified and secretly happy. Terrified because I don't know who left behind this word, and why he lives hidden in the deep mountains next to the water. Happy because he will finally meet someone who can even be considered a friend. He nodded and took 3 steps to the right. Sure enough, there was a carved circle on the ground. In the middle of the circle was a rusty iron ring. He tried to squat down, his arms trembling, and he raised his hand to pull up the iron ring. Pulling the ring was not difficult, but at this moment he was exhausted, sweating like rain, and could barely lift it. As soon as the iron ring popped up, the round stone also opened, revealing a deep hole. Inside was a jade box. On the lid of the box are engraved the following words: "Friend, there are 3 pills in the box. If you feel too tired, take all 3 pills at once and you will feel better immediately." He quickly opened the jade box, and sure enough, there were 3 pills inside. Without hesitation, he put all 3 pills in his mouth and swallowed. In just a moment, his spirit was uplifted and his strength immediately recovered. King Phi quickly bowed and clasped his hands in thanks. "This is Dang King Phi." Because he was injured by the enemy, he was pushed into the river and drifted here. If the senior does not blame you, please allow me to bow once to express my gratitude. Having finished speaking, he immediately knelt down and worshipped. After bowing, he stood up, but there was still no response from around him. In his heart, he was extremely surprised and thought, "Is it possible that the person who left these words is no longer here?" He looked everywhere and saw that behind the rock was a flat land. Behind the land was a black rock with a cave opening on it. He quickly picked up the jade box and looked closely. Sure enough, at the bottom of the box were engraved a few lines of red letters. "You were really observant, even paying attention to the bottom of the box. From now on, you are our guest. Please enter the first living room. Our first living room is the second cave on the left, on the mountainside behind." After reading, Kim Fi was even more surprised, thinking, "A hidden person like this is truly unpredictable. It seems like he knows everything in advance." His words are gentle, like he's talking to an old friend. He immediately walked to the left, arriving in front of the second cave entrance. This time, his steps were lighter. Although his strength has not completely recovered, his strength has recovered quite a bit, enough to enter the cave. In fact, he did not know that those words were coated with a special substance that could glow in the dark, and that the medicine he had just taken also helped him see things clearly in the dark. But his eyesight was already better than anyone else's, so he didn't need to rely on the effects of medicine. He entered the second cave, walked about a meter, then turned to the side and saw a few lines of words engraved on the cliff. "You and I have never known each other. I don't need to know your name, and you don't need to know mine either. Names are just symbols of lies, don't you see? Making precious friends is at heart. If you agree with what I said, loudly shout 3 times, 'Yes, yes, yes,' then you will enter her first living room." Although Kim Fi was surprised, he still obeyed his master's words and spoke loudly, "Yes, yes, yes." As soon as he finished speaking, a miracle immediately appeared. Kim Fi saw a large door suddenly appear on the cliff next to him. The door opened wide, bright jewel light shone out. On the stone wall next to the door are carved a few words, "You and I are acquainted now. Please consider this place as your home, no need to be formal. Please come in." Kim Fi stepped inside and felt the ground soft. Bowing his head to look closely, he realized that under his feet was a sheet blanket spread as a carpet. The fur was an inch thicker, so it was unusually soft. The 4 corners of the room are inlaid with 4 bright pearls the size of a rice bowl, from which the bright light in the room radiates. In the middle of the room is a stone table. On the table is a piece of paper, which reads, "If you're hungry, just open the freezer to get temporary food. It's not very delicious, but you can still eat it." Sure enough, Kim Fi felt hungry at that moment. He quickly opened the freezer and saw a lot of marinated meat inside. "Take it out and try it. Unexpectedly, it's quite delicious." After eating his fill, he began to carefully observe the room. The room is full of paintings and couplets, enough to see that the owner of this place is absolutely not an ordinary person. As time passed, Kim Fi became more and more aware of the strange compatibility between him and his master. Although the words left behind contained many hidden meanings, he immediately understood after just reading them, like 2 soulmates who had known each other for a long time. He went from room to room, learning an excellent light martial art called Not Twin Fu. In addition, in another stone room, he also obtained a precious sword with flashing light, named Bitch Van Sword, and a sword technique Bitch Van 3 forms, extremely exquisite moves, unparalleled in power. When entering the last stone room, Kim Fi saw that the owner left an envelope and 2 maps. In the letter it was written, "You can't meet her, because she is already resting peacefully under this land. If you want to leave this place and return to wandering around, take my mother's cart as a token, find your servant Ho Van Sin, or his descendants at Bitch Ba Tri, under Bitch Ba Fong, Chung Nam Mountain. They will summon people to help you. My friend, your martial arts skills can now be said to be unrivaled. If you are determined to leave, I wish you smooth sailing." Kim Fi put the scarf on his hand, carried the Bitch Van sword on his back, and wore the white AO dye left by his owner. Looking at the guestbook paper, he couldn't hold back his tears and choked up and said, You have treated me too well. I really don't know how to properly thank you. Although the words are short, they contain a complete feeling. In this stone room, he mastered rare medical techniques, completely eliminating the ancient poison in his body. Not only that, martial arts also improved dramatically, to an extent that even he could not expect. The master also left him a great support, his old subordinate force. Kim Fai opened the map and saw a map clearly drawing the way up Chung Nam Mountain to find Ho Van Sin. After making arrangements, he bowed his head 3 times and prayed softly, "Dear sir, when the wanderings are over, I will definitely come back here to pay my respects. Goodbye." Having finished speaking, he walked out the door, surfing on the surface of the waves, gradually disappearing. Chapter 20. Fierce battle on the mountain peak. The sun tilted to the west, birds flew together to the forest, all the villages were filled with blue smoke rising from the afternoon. It was the middle of July, one afternoon, exactly 3 months after King Fai was dropped into the river. On the top of a high mountain in the Wuxia range, a young man in a white Ao dye stood silently looking into the distance. That was King Fai, who had just stepped out of the mountain. He sighed softly and said to himself, "From today onwards, I must become a martial arts hero to take revenge, and at the same time find out my identity." He knew that his martial arts skills had reached the ultimate level, and that in the world of martial arts, few people could compete with him. Assessing his own strength, he believed that he had reached the first rank of Fire Marquis. If he fought alone, I am afraid that not many experts could win. Thinking about that, he felt extremely happy. Kim Fai looked up at the sky and let out a long howl. The roar echoed loudly, traveling dozens of miles. As soon as the sound ended, another howl echoed from afar. He immediately recognized that it was Lu Kui Fuang Tian's voice, so he smiled faintly and muttered, "I was planning to find you, but I didn't expect you to bring the body yourself." Having finished speaking, he howled again. This time his voice was full of provocation. Sure enough, the other person roared in response again, but this time the sound was much closer. As soon as the scream ended, Kim Fai frowned slightly, because he realized that Fuang Tian's martial arts seemed to have improved significantly compared to before. Thinking for a moment, he immediately understood and said to himself, "That fierce battle 3 months ago, no wonder I lost so miserably. It's understandable that ghost fishing Vu Kim was injured by my strange martial arts. But the force of Fuang Tian's palm that hit me on the mountainside at that time was incredibly strong. If he had been injured at that time, how could he have had the strength to come back and sneak attack me? No matter how profound Fuang Tian's skills are now, I am not afraid, because I have enough strength to defeat him." While he was thinking, 2 faint laughter rang out from the mountain. Right after that, 2 thin, yellow-shirted figures with taciturn faces full of danger suddenly appeared not far from him. Those 2 people are Lu Kui Fuang Tian and the third man Keep Fach Kui Tran Kai of the group Lukthu 3 Ghosts. As soon as they saw King Fai, both of them looked surprised. Fuang Tian smiled faintly and raised his voice, "Little guy. We haven't seen each other for 3 months, but I didn't expect you to pretend to be alone like this." Kim Fai coldly replied, "I'm here to reclaim the debt I owed 3 months ago. This time, both capital and interest must be paid." Tran Kai smiled like crazy and continued, "Little guy. You must have eaten the liver and bile of a tiger to dare come to Lukthu Sun to cause such trouble. Last time, you were lucky to escape death, but this time, don't leave here." Kim Fai smiled faintly and replied, "With 2 mediocre ranks like yours, you're not even qualified to keep me." Fuang Tian smirked and continued, "Qualified or not, just try it and you'll know right away." As soon as he finished speaking, Fuang Tian swung his palm and hit King Fai straight in the head. At the same time, Tran Kai raised his hand and threw it continuously. 2 jets of indescribably foul black smoke immediately shot straight into King Fai's eyes and nose, while his 2 hands aimed at the 5 vital points on the opponent's chest and pointed at them. Unexpectedly, the opponent immediately took action as soon as he spoke. Kim Fai quickly performed the ultimate light attack, not Twin Few. His body was as light as smoke, passing through the fierce wind to avoid it. From the moment they heard the enemy's roar, Huang Tian and Tran Kai knew the opponent's martial arts were profound. However, because of their habitual arrogance, anyone who dares to break into their territory is considered nothing. Moreover, if you really can't beat the enemy, there is Master Luke Thieu Ma Quan behind you to help. In martial arts, no matter how big or small, Luke Thieu Ma Quan only needs to show up and it's over. When they realized that the person facing them was Dang Kim Phi, the person who 3 months ago cut off Wu Kim's right hand, and was then dropped into the river by Huang Tian, they thought he had died a long time ago. Who would have thought that now they would see him standing tall before their eyes, making both of them quite scared. Just by glancing at Kim Phi's expression, they understood that his internal injuries were not only healed, but his strength was also far more advanced than before. Therefore, as soon as they rushed forward, they immediately made a killing move. Unexpectedly, both of them attacked at the same time. Although the attack was extremely powerful, in front of them only a white shadow appeared and then immediately disappeared. Huang Tian and Tran Kai were startled and frightened. Without warning, they pulled out the 5-poison lotus claw and danced a pair of deformed weapons to protect their entire bodies, then suddenly turned around. Before their eyes, Kim Phi was standing more than a meter away, with a faint smile on her mouth, her hands clasped behind her back. Humiliated to the extreme, Huang Tian and Tran Kai shouted at the same time, waving the poison lotus claw in parallel. The pair of weapons looked like 2 stinky black centipedes. Toxic smoke billowed out, divided into 2 directions, and attacked Kim Phi. At the same time, the fingers of the poisonous claw suddenly let go. The true energy was pushed to the limit, preparing to spray poisonous water. The 2 chains of lotus claw danced loudly, poisonous hooks bristling like a rainstorm, continuously beating down. Seeing the other side acting so dangerously, Kim Phi thought to himself, I didn't expect their abilities to be so powerful. It seems that their master, Luke Thieu Ma Quan, is probably no less than my loyal father. He mentioned that father-in-law, it was Fien Ma. Huang Tian and Tran Kai simultaneously pressed the 5-poison lotus purple claw latch, and immediately from their iron fingers, streams of poisonous smoke shot out towards Kim Phi. But they didn't know that his martial arts had now reached an extremely high level. Ordinary poisons could no longer threaten him, not to mention that every movement was difficult to escape his eyes and ears. Smelling the strong fishy smell, Kim Phi just smiled faintly and thought to himself, fortunately, in the past, I drifted into Bitch Van's cave to search for guests, otherwise I would have lost my life because of this poison. As soon as his thoughts ended, he suddenly opened his eyes wide, raised both hands and grabbed 16 claws. Each stream of strong energy shot out, powerfully shattering the opponent's black light. When Huang Tian and Tran Kai saw this, they were frightened. They did not expect Kim Phi's aura to be so powerful, but without any appointment, the 2 jumped up and joined forces to attack. This time, they performed the ultimate technique 5 poisons, 24 immortals of Luke Thieu Mountain. I only saw 2 flashes of black light, as fast as a violent storm, pressing towards Kim Phi's body. Under the sunset light, the poisonous hooks on the 2 strands of lotus claw flashed brightly, the streams of black light interwoven into a net, shooting straight down. At the same time, a layer of 5-colored steam rose around Kim Phi's body, supporting that net of black light. Foam Gadak 24 was originally a dharma created by Luke Thieu Ma Quan after going into seclusion. One is to increase his prestige when he returns to the world, and the other is to bring his disciples to the ranks of martial arts masters. Therefore, until now, they have never performed this ultimate technique. If today's opponent wasn't Kim Phi, I'm afraid they wouldn't have used it. But once that martial art has been displayed, it is unthinkable for the enemy to want to retreat completely. At that moment, Kim Phi smiled faintly. He wore Dragon Feng Quang Chi to protect his body, and at the same time used the body technique Dragon Cloud Release, rushing straight into the dark air to capture the opponent's weapon. His body was indescribably fast, and in the blink of an eye, he counterattacked violently. The 2 hands danced wildly, the palms of the palms rushed, knocking back the black light and shooting it in all directions. The two sides fought for more than 30 rounds, and suddenly there was a boom sound. The figures separated, blood splashed like rain. Immediately afterward, there was a popping sound. Tran Kai staggered, could not stand, and fell to the ground. 5 holes were punctured in his shoulder, and fresh blood spurted out continuously. Phuong Tien stood more than a meter away, still holding the lotus claw in his hand, but the chain was hanging down on the ground. His face was pale, his eyes were dull, but his gaze was still fixed on Kim Phi. Kim Phi's expression was solemn. In his hand he had captured Tran Kai's lotus claw. He smiled faintly, swung the chain with his left hand and gave it a strong swipe. Immediately, the chain turned into an umbrella of light, aiming straight at Tran Kai, who was lying on the ground. Phuong Tien let out a strange scream and quickly jumped back to cover the unconscious Tran Kentucky. But he came too late. I only saw that the lean-to claw had just hit Tran Kai's chest and abdomen when it suddenly shifted to one side and crashed into the nearby rock, half a meter deep. Kim Phi was startled and frightened. He was clearly aiming at Tran Kai. He had absolutely no intention of hitting the rock. Why did the chain suddenly shoot diagonally like that? Obviously there is a master lurking around here. He smiled faintly, raised his voice and asked, "Which noble person would come here to help Wuxia the 3 ghosts?" As soon as the words ended, behind the rock suddenly a very strange-looking person, about middle age, slowly walked out. That person's body was about the same size, his face was red, his head was as big as a dove, his hair was tangled down to his shoulders, his eyes shot out 2 strange lights. As soon as he appeared, he angrily looked straight at Kim Phi and coldly said, "Little guy, quickly tell me who your teacher is. Let the old man see who can teach such a good disciple and even dare to come to the old man's Wuxia mountain." His tone was extremely arrogant. Hearing that, Kim Phi immediately understood the other person's identity, then smiled faintly and replied, "Is it true that Wuxia, the 3 ghosts, those mediocre disciples, were taught by you?" At that time, Phuong Tien quickly walked to Wuxia Ma Quan's side, bowed respectfully and said, "Master, this kid is Kim Huck's command master Dang Kim Phi." Wuxia Ma Quan heard that and coldly said, Okay. The old man thought you had turned into water in the river. Who would have thought that your life was still great and you are still alive today? Kid, next year this day will be your death anniversary. Kim Phi smiled faintly. I heard that you guys agreed to become a henchman to join the Thiat Hong gang, which really surprised the wanderer hero. Wuxia Ma Quan angrily shouted, "Shut up!" As soon as the scream ended, he swung his palm and rushed forward to attack. The foul wind and fog rolled up, and in the blink of an eye, 15 palms were fired in a row. Seeing Wuxia Ma Quan attack, Kim Phi was even more convinced that his judgment was not wrong. The opponent's skill was indeed profound. He did not dare to be careless, smiled faintly a few times, then put his true strength into his hands and raised them to block. Just as the 2 sides were about to fight, suddenly from Ma Quan's hand a light as fast as lightning shot out, straight into Kim Phi's chest. It turned out that as soon as Wuxia Ma Quan made his move, he immediately deployed his weapon and became famous as Ngu Poison Lotus Claw. Waiting for the opponent to get close, he suddenly unleashed a great skill to attack. Kim Phi was startled, quickly pushed with both hands, his body jumped high, and at the same time performed Dragon Cloud Release, looking like a large dragon hovering in the air, causing the enemy's poisonous claws and poisonous gas to pass below. As soon as he escaped, Kim Phi let out a long scream. Right hand raised, golden light flashed blindingly. The divine sword Kim Huck was drawn and slashed straight at Wuxia Ma Quan's head. Wuxia Ma Quan originally intended to use a surprise move to gain the upper hand, but also wanted to let out a few taunts. Who would have thought that as soon as he looked up, he saw Kim Phi jumping high, his body spinning in a beautiful circle, so fast that ordinary people could hardly keep up. Before he could recover, he saw Kim Phi in midair draw his sword and counterattack. His heart could not help but be frightened. His golden sword glowed as brightly as the rising sun, accompanied by the roaring sound of the wind. The overwhelming sword force poured down from above. Luke Thieu Ma Quan panicked, forgot to maintain a defensive stance, quickly danced 5 poison lotus purple claw to face the battle, and at the same time let out a heart-stopping scream, only to see his lotus claw suddenly turn into hundreds of black centipedes flying around. The strong fishy smell rising up makes people nauseous, billowing and hitting straight at the shadow of King Fai's sword. After a few popping and clattering sounds, the wind suddenly subsided. Golden light shot out in all 4 directions, and the figure in the curtain of light and poisonous mist suddenly separated to the 2 sides. Luke Thieu Ma Quan's hair became even more messy, his face turned red, and his body flew more than 8 meters away. As soon as he touched the ground, he let out a huh sound, turned around, then swung his weapon to attack again. At this point, Kim Fai only used 8 successful attacks, using the Tien John Kim twist stance to cope. As soon as the 2 sides clashed, he felt his blood rising, so he held his breath, turned around, bent his back, and rushed after Luke Thieu Ma Quan to attack relentlessly. Suddenly Ma Quan shouted loudly, "In that case, I send you home early." Having finished speaking, he swung the lotus claw and hit Kim Fai straight in the chest and abdomen. At the same time, Phuong Tien also rushed to help fight. Seeing that, Kim Fai just smiled faintly and said contemptuously, "Okay. I accept both teachers and students." As soon as he finished speaking, he slid 3 steps to the side, his left hand reached up to grab Phuong Tien's head, and at the same time his right hand danced the Kim Hut divine sword to welcome Ma Quan's dark light. In just a blink of an eye, the 2 sides fought fiercely, their moves becoming faster and faster. Before my eyes I could only see black energy and golden light entwined, no longer distinguishing human silhouettes. The sand and rocks on the ground were thrown up by force and shot out in all 4 directions like rain. Suddenly there was a pop sound, followed by a pitiful scream. Fresh blood splashed, a black shadow was thrown out, lying motionless on the ground. Luke Thieu Ma Quan seemed crazy, rushed to the corpse, swung his left palm and hit hard, only to hear a resounding boom. Phuong Tien let out a pitiful scream, his limbs convulsed, and breathed his last breath. At that moment, there was a pop sound, and it turned out that Phuong Tien's lotus claw fell from above, hitting the rock that made that sound. When he killed Phuong Tien, Luke Thieu Ma Quan discovered that Kim Fai had only broken his right arm and then hit a few non-important acupuncture points, which did not result in him losing his life as he had thought. Thinking that, he regretted it immensely and his face became even paler. He hugged Phuong Tien's body tightly, screaming in pain, "Phuong Mi! Heaven!" But Phuong Tien's body was stiff, his eyes were closed, his soul had already returned to the underworld. Luke Thieu Ma Quan's tears welled up, he gritted his teeth and pursed his lips, slowly turning his head to look back. Kim Fai still stood in the same place, smiling faintly, cold eyes looking straight at him, murderous aura billowing, making the other person shiver. Although Luke Thieu Ma Quan was frightened, the pain was so painful that he could not bear it. The 2 stood facing each other, silently looking at each other for a long time. Kim Fai slowly raised his head to look at the sky. At that time, the new moon had just risen, and he did not say a word. Luke Thieu Ma Quan's eyes were bloodshot, his face pale, and he quietly approached step by step. The anger in his heart had reached its peak. Of the 3 disciples, 2 died, 1 was seriously injured, and were all destroyed in the hands of this boy. How could he not hate Kim Fai to the core? The closer he got, the more he put his internal force into the 5 poison lotus purple claw. The chain immediately hardened like steel, black gas continuously emitted. His left hand also gradually swelled and turned black, showing that he had used all his strength, preparing to risk his life. In the middle of the night, the cold wind blew, Ma Quan's hair fluttered. The left arm slowly raised, twice its normal size, the skin was black as if smeared with ink. Under the dim moonlight, his appearance looked even more creepy. Kim Fai still leisurely looked up at the new moon, no one knew what he was thinking. Luke Thieu Ma Quan took another step forward, his left arm raised to his chest. The lotus claw's thread became more and more dense with black smoke, his ghostly face darkened, his eyes gradually became dull. Step by step, Luke Thieu Ma Quan quietly advanced without making a single sound. He had devoted all his true strength to cultivating for decades on Luke Thieu Mountain, but unfortunately the poisonous gas had not yet been refined. Even so, he still put everything into practice, determined to risk his life to avenge the two dead disciples. His poisonous energy, along with the old blood energy and Du Bang divine art, were originally ranked among the 3 supreme techniques of the evil sect. Those 3 martial arts were founded by Doc Lao Fong Jia Mak, the master of the once famous Hong Hong Doc Ma. The great learning has been lost for hundreds of years, but unexpectedly it will reappear on Luke Thieu Ma Quan. Kim Fai glanced over, somewhat surprised, but a cold smile appeared on the corner of his lips. At first he did not intend to kill Luke Thieu Ma Quan. The other person's miserable appearance aroused some compassion. But when he saw the unformed poisonous gas spreading, his thoughts immediately changed. At that moment, Luke Thieu Ma Quan howled, his body rushed forward to attack. The iron-hard lotus claw in his hand simultaneously shot out 5 streams of black energy, like 5 poisonous arrows, aiming straight at Kim Fai's 5 great acupoints. Kim Fai still stood motionless, seemingly unaware. Waiting for the 5 black auras to be just an inch away from his body, he suddenly jumped up. The body rotated several times, gently passing through 5 clouds of black smoke, slowly rising. At the same time, his right hand stretched out, instantly turning into countless palm shadows, grabbing Luke Thieu Ma Quan's hand straight. Luke Thieu Ma Quan quickly withdrew his hand, raised the lotus claw to strike Kim Fai in the face, and at the same time slowly raised his left hand. In the middle of his palm, a stream of black smoke billowed out, quickly condensing into a small black ball. Seeing that, Kim Fai was startled and frightened, thinking, could this be the palm of Tam Loi? He did not expect that Luke Thieu Ma Quan would be able to refine a poisonous gas that had been lost for hundreds of years. Once used, this palm is extremely cruel, often a desperate move, life and death with the opponent. As soon as the thought flashed, Kim Fai acted as fast as the wind, using his strength to block the stinky black gas coming from all 4 directions. At that time, the black blood ball in Luke Thieu Ma Quan's hand swelled more and more. Once it grows to the size of a hand, it will immediately explode. Whether the power is strong or weak depends on the skill of the person performing the Tam Loi palm. The higher the force, the more terrible the explosion. Even if they are inferior, their power is still 3 or 4 times greater than that person's own. Therefore, Kim Fai could not help but be startled, afraid that it would be difficult to resist. The 2 sides fought again for more than 10 rounds. Luke Thieu Ma Quan danced the lotus claw, the foul smelly black gas billowing, tightly surrounding Kim Fai in the middle. Suddenly, his eyes turned red, and with a strong wave of his right hand, Ling Tu Treo suddenly stopped. Just hearing a whoosh sound, a stream of black gas as big as a child's arm, as fast as lightning, shot straight towards Kim Fai. As soon as the black gas left his hand, Ma Quan immediately jumped up and waved his right hand again. The lotus claw strand turned into a black light that soared into the air, circled around and then left his hand, falling down with a pop. In an instant, the lotus claw suddenly exploded. Black poisonous water sprayed down like rain, poisonous hooks shot wildly, and 5 claw fingers were aimed straight at Kim Fai's chest, as dangerous as a poisonous snake. This attack was extremely cruel. It was clear that Luke Thieu Ma Quan was determined to risk his life and live and die with the opponent. Kim Fai knew early on that the other side would definitely use that cruel trick, causing him to be confused and unable to react in time, and then unleash his Tam Loi attack. At that point, it would be difficult to defend or avoid. Sure enough, he guessed right. Luke Thieu Ma Quan did exactly that. The black smoke carrying poisonous poison quickly spread within a circle of 1 staff. Kim Fai hastily used all his strength, struck out 2 consecutive palms, and at the same time thought to himself, if we don't find a way to escape at this time, I'm afraid it will be difficult to survive. As soon as the palm wind was released, the black gas and dark light were only 5 meters away from the top of his head. Unexpectedly, Wuxia Ma Quan had already foreseen it, immediately using his internal force to press hard, causing the black gas to avoid the palm wind, and at the same time press in from both sides. Ma Quan's face became darker and darker, his ferocity clearly visible. He raised his left palm high, the blood ball in his hand was as big as his hand. While King Fai was frantic, he burst into laughter twice, his red eyes glowing like two fireballs. Chapter 21. Dig Vi Thuong. King Fai was frantically fending off the attacks from both sides when Wuxia Ma Quan used his Tam Loi palm to attack him. The Heart Thunder palm is the essence and blood of the whole body gathered into the palm of the hand. Its power is immeasurable. When launching this palm, the user must tightly seal all vital points to avoid external injuries. All internal energy and blood are expended at arm's length, continuously shooting out until it dries up. Unless there is an expert with the ultimate strength, willing to sacrifice decades of internal strength to impart strength to help, otherwise even if the enemy dies, the caster will still have difficulty escaping the death that follows. At that time, Wuxia Ma Quan's appearance became even more terrifying, like a devil looking for prey. He looked intently at the other person. The black blood in his hand had gathered to the limit. If King Fai did not escape quickly, he would definitely die on the spot. As soon as King Fai saw Ma Quan's face and demeanor, he was frightened, and at the same time carefully observed the direction the evil was approaching. He was still looking for a way to escape when Wuxia Ma Quan suddenly let out a terrible howl, his body soaring high like a big bird flapping its wings. Sand and dust rolled up, the wind suppressed violently, the force covered the entire 4-square and round circle around it. At that moment, a deafening howl rang out from the top of the mountain. Before the sound ended, a white shadow was seen rushing down from the top of the mountain, light as smoke, gliding several meters away. As soon as the white ball touched the ground, it slid far away, and in the blink of an eye it was gone. On the top of the mountain, only Wuxia Ma Quan remained, surrounded by black gas and billowing black fog. He stood in a daze, his face bewildered, wondering, what kind of body and footwork did the opponent just use to be able to escape his palm force and force like that? Thinking about that, he felt somewhat comforted, because he had not yet activated his Heart Thunder palm. If you have used that palm, even if you carry spiritual medicine that has not yet been refined, it will be difficult to cure. What's more, even if he kills the opponent, his internal strength and true strength will at least lose one armor, which is equivalent to losing all his martial arts. Now, his only hope is that one day he will refine it into a spiritual medicine, and the poisonous gas will also be successful. At that time, he will definitely find Kim Huck's order master to destroy it. Thinking so, he smiled faintly and muttered to himself, "We have to wait until then when we return to the world. Who else can compete with us?" At that time, he was focusing on practicing that poison gas technique. His acceptance to join the Thiat Hong gang was partly due to his close relationship with gang leader Ta Fong, and partly because he wanted to borrow the gang's power to practice in peace. Who would have thought that this would create a formidable enemy? Wuxia Ma Quan stood stunned on the top of the mountain for a moment, then carried the bodies of Phuong Tien and Tran Kai up, smiled faintly for a while before turning down the mountain. When he was out of sight, a white shadow appeared on the top of the mountain, which was Kim Huck's command master Dang King Fai. He looked in the direction Ma Quan left, sighed softly and said, "This person is truly scary. Sooner or later I will have to use the Kim Huck command to kill him." Having finished speaking, he rushed away as fast as an arrow, straight to the southwest, hiding in the rolling Van Sun mountain range. As soon as the sky cleared, Kim Fai arrived at Tung Van Phong, the founding place of the Bok Dok Mon sect. He raised his head to look at the high mountain reaching into the sky, white clouds hovering across his back, majestic aura, truly worthy of the name Tung Van, the place where the sect was founded. He stood in the middle of the mountainside and observed for a while. Seeing that his judgment was correct, he continued walking up. On the top of the mountain, the trees were dense. It was autumn at that time, and the mountain wind blew cold to the bone. The mountain road is winding, covered with thorny grass, and ordinary people rarely set foot there. King Fi walked around for a long time but still could not find the destination. He then used the long Van Dun technique to fly high. When he was about to reach the top, he suddenly saw that on the left there was a fire-red maple forest, stretching for dozens of miles, with absolutely no other trees mixed in. The scenery was extremely beautiful. The sun had just risen, golden light shone down on the maple forest, making the scene even more brilliant. King Fi was excited, her feet were light, her body like a shooting star rushed straight into the maple forest. Every tree grows straight, with luxuriant branches and leaves like a canopy. The leaves should have withered in the fall, but this maple forest is still unusually green. King Fi was originally an elegant person. When he saw such a beautiful scene, he stopped to recite a few verses. But suddenly thinking about his tragic life and the great revenge he had yet to repay, he couldn't help but sigh. At that moment, the sound of bustling footsteps suddenly rang out in the forest, causing the birds to flap their wings in fright and fly away. Right after that, a woodcutter carrying a large hammer slowly walked out of the forest. His body is muscular, his face is full of thick black beard. As he walked, he muttered, "Everyone says that working as a woodcutter is miserable, but I personally find this job very enjoyable." As soon as he left the forest, the woodcutter was immediately stunned when he saw a handsome young man standing there with his arms crossed. The young man wore a white ao dye, had skin as white as powder, long black eyebrows, bright eyes, and stood tall and still exuding elegance. The woodcutter looked at King Fi in bewilderment, seemingly not believing that such an elegant character would appear in this desolate mountain and forest. As soon as King Fi saw him, he clasped his hands and bowed. The woodcutter was even more stunned, hesitated for a long time before asking, "Who is this gentleman, greeting?" King Fi recognized that this woodcutter had sharp eyes and high forehead. It was clear that he was a master of both internal and external skills, but he did not expose it, just smiled elegantly and asked, "Dear friends, is this Tum Van Phong?" The woodcutter looked at him intently, thought for a moment, then raised his voice and asked again, "You are a well-educated person, why do you ask about this mountain?" He asked again, his voice full of doubt, "But how did you get to such a high mountain?" As he spoke, he raised his hand to caress the shiny magic hammer, which looked to weigh at least 300 pounds. Seeing that the big man looked so adorable, King Fi smiled and lied. There was an old man with very long hair, a fierce face but a gentle personality. He met me at the foot of the mountain and knew I wanted to come up here to visit, so I told him to close his eyes. Just a moment later, I was standing on this mountain. When the woodcutter heard what he said, his expression changed and he quickly asked, "What kind of clothes does that old man wear?" "Anything more to say?" King Fi immediately described Luke Thieu Ma Quan's appearance and continued, "He also said he wanted to find someone from the Bakdak sect." As soon as he heard that, the woodcutter's face changed dramatically and he exclaimed, "Oh!" As expected, why? Before he could finish speaking, he shot like lightning, pointed straight at King Fi's acupuncture point, and then laughed. "Little guy. Follow him back for a trip first, other things will be discussed later." Having finished speaking, he held King Fi in one hand and a large hammer in the other, his body rushing like flying, straight into the maple forest. In fact, King Fi had already closed his acupuncture point, so when he was pointed, he pretended to be unconscious and let the other person take him away. In his heart, he could not help but secretly admire the woodcutter's health and diligence. Just hearing the sound of the wind whistling in his ears, he also knew that the other side performed extremely domineering air attacks, and always walked on bumpy and dangerous paths. After running about 10 miles, the woodcutter suddenly noticed someone in the forest and stopped walking. In front of him, an old man with a long horse-like face, tall and muscular body, about 50 years old, dressed very politely suddenly jumped out. As soon as he saw the woodcutter, he laughed madly and asked, "Little guy, are you a disciple of young Doc Tam?" The woodcutter immediately took a defensive stance, gently put King Fi down to the side and coldly asked again, "Are you the executioner sent by the Thiat Hong gang?" The neatly dressed old man laughed loudly. "Kid, quickly report your name, then accept death." The woodcutter raised his giant hammer and coldly replied, "Your ancestor's name is Bien Ho. And what are you?" The old man smiled faintly and continued, "The old man is Nak Lam, deputy head of Bang Sai Hall. Kid, quickly submit your life." Having finished speaking, he raised his palm in front of his chest and jumped forward to attack. When Bien Ho heard the other person claim his identity, without saying another word, he let out a loud roar, swung the big hammer and rushed forward, slashing straight at Nak Lam's hands. Nak Lam couldn't help but be frightened when he saw that. He didn't expect that the other person was so young and had such strong internal strength. He quickly poured all his strength, his palms jumped up like a storm, continuously hitting the major acupuncture points on Bien Ho's body. The pressure from all directions became heavier and heavier, the palms were as heavy as mountains pressing down. Bien Ho quickly mobilized his true strength, swung his giant hammer quickly, blocking each wave of palm wind. The fierce battle reached its climax, sand and rocks on the ground were blown away by force, blinding the entire area. In terms of strength and martial arts, Bien Ho is quite far behind Nak Lam. But he is endowed with unusual strength. Although he appears foolish on the outside, he is actually very wise, and he trains extremely diligently on weekdays. The incredibly heavy hammer in his hand danced quickly and gently like a fake hammer. Thanks to that, he was able to temporarily struggle with Nak Lam. Kim Phi was placed under a tree and immediately opened his eyes to observe. Seeing that although Bien Ho was still young, he was stronger than anyone else and extremely flexible in his responses, he couldn't help but secretly praise him. However, in terms of true academic talent, Bien Ho is still difficult to compete with Nak Lam. But his hammer of more than 300 pounds is not ordinary. Whenever he is in danger, he performs strange hammer movements to neutralize the danger. Nak Lam knew that the other person was still far behind him, so he smiled faintly and said, "Little guy, let me see how much of Dunan's skills you have learned." In the 50th round of the fight, Nak Lam suddenly performed the evil Sai Tai Kat stance, reaching out with 10 fingers, aiming at 6 vital points in front of Bien Ho's body. Bien Ho swung the hammer wildly, slashing at Nak Lam's arms. Seeing that, Kim Phi was startled and frightened. Although he did not know how sophisticated Nak Lam's moves were, he knew that if the hammer slashed directly at the opponent's elbow, Nak Lam would have 7 ways to respond. Meanwhile, Bien Ho's attack power is inherently poor and is not as flexible as the opponent in changing his moves. As soon as the thought flashed, Kim Phi saw that Bien Ho's hammer was about to touch Nak Lam's elbow. Sure enough, Nak Lam smiled faintly, his wrist turned slightly, his left hand immediately grabbed Bien Ho's wrist holding the hammer, and his right hand curled up like an iron hook, grabbing the opponent's face straight. The event happened so suddenly that Bien Ho was startled and frightened, he couldn't even turn his hand in time. He quickly roared, kicked his leg straight into Nak Lam's lower body, and at the same time, using that momentum, he turned his wrist and brought the hammer blade back to slash his opponent's neck. Nak Lam just smiled faintly, his left foot stomped hard on the ground, his body spinning. Just half a turn, he bent down, raised his palm and slashed straight at Bien Ho's ankle. At this time, Bien Ho was in a defeated position, his hands and feet were within the range of the opponent's palm force. Just as he bent his legs and was about to turn the hammer to slash Nak Lam's leg, he suddenly turned around, raised his palm and hit the top of his head hard. If he was hit by that attack, Bien Ho would definitely die on the spot. At the moment of danger, Kim Phi flicked out a pebble and used his potential to strike it. At the same time, he turned his palm and pushed hard, only to hear a click sound. Nak Lam suddenly felt a sharp pain in the Kaimon acupuncture point, his true energy was blocked, his descending arm gradually let go, no longer able to exert force. Bien Ho thought it was difficult to escape death, so he gritted his teeth, raised his hammer and slashed down, hoping to get back some of his capital. Even if he died, he would not suffer any loss. Suddenly, he heard Nak Lam say "huh," and there was a crack sound. The opponent's hand fell down, unable to hit him. At the same time, Bien Ho felt a strong force pushing him back 3 steps. However, the hammer in his hand fell even faster. Oh my! A horrifying scream rang out, and fresh blood splashed. Nak Lam was cut in half. The lower half of the body was still struggling on the ground, looking extremely scary. The upper half of the body was thrown 3 meters away. The muscles were still twitching. Bien Ho didn't understand what was going on. His body took 3 more steps before stopping. The other person's blood splattered all over his body. He raised his hand to wipe away the blood and sweat and softly exclaimed, "How dangerous!" After that, Bien Ho bewilderedly raised his head, looked around, and asked loudly, "Which senior just saved Bien Ho? Please appear so that Bien Ho can bow in gratitude." Seeing no one answer, he continued, "Junior Bien Ho, the last disciple of Woodcutter Dak Tam, Grand Master of Bok Dak Sect. For saving my life just now, please come out here so my juniors can kowtow in gratitude." Having finished speaking, he clasped his hands and bowed, turned around in a circle, as if bowing in all 4 directions, then raised his head and said loudly, "Today, the Thiat Hong gang will come and destroy the Bok Dak sect, unless this sect voluntarily surrenders. The situation is urgent, Junior must go now." Having finished speaking, he bowed again, then turned around and picked up King Phi, smiling and saying, "I don't believe this kid doesn't know any martial arts." Having finished speaking, he rushed straight into the deep forest, his body quickly disappearing. Chapter 22. Ox-haired little concubine. Bien Ho walked very quickly. In just a few moments he passed several miles and came to a stream. The stream water is clear and the fish swimming below are clearly visible. Suddenly he was startled and quickly took a few steps forward, because he saw 2 middle-aged people lying motionless next to the stream, their whole bodies covered in blood. The 2 people died extremely horribly. Their faces were chopped up, their chests were opened, their intestines were pulled out and chopped into pieces. A scene that made anyone who saw them nauseous. Bien Ho stood silently for a while, tears suddenly flowing from his eyes. He silently prayed, "Rest in peace, you too. This Bien Ho will definitely take revenge on your behalf." Having finished speaking, he carried King Phi on his back and followed the stream to continue upstream. Walking a little further, he suddenly stopped. King Phi slowly opened his eyes and saw 4 black corpses lying next to the stream, as if they had died from severe poison. Bien Ho glanced over and smiled faintly. "Those bitches of Thiat Hong gang, dying like that is too light. If only a few more people had been poisoned and killed." Having said that, he continued walking. At the end of the stream is a cave. Water flows from the cave. Right in front of the door there are more than 10 corpses lying around. Seeing that, Bien Ho was extremely impatient and rushed straight into the cave, muttering curses as he walked. "They fought all the way here and I still didn't know it. It's so miserable, so much." Not long after, he heard the pitiful screams of killing in the cave. Clearly a battle had broken out. Bien Ho cursed while rushing in. Once there, he immediately put King Phi on the ground and said, "Sorry, let's take a break here for a moment, so you don't get stuck in your hands and feet." Having finished speaking, he swung his hammer and rushed straight inside. King Phi was extremely surprised, thinking that the Thiat Hong gang was truly domineering, daring to drag people to their lairs and massacre them. As he thought, he stood up, his body like a shadow rushing into the cave. The deeper we went, the more resounding the screams of killing and killing were, mixed with Bien Ho's loud scolding. King Phi knew clearly that Bok Dak Mon had been swept away by the Thiat Hong gang. As soon as he turned sideways, he reached the cave entrance. He saw a bright light inside, people's shadows flickering, and miserable screams rang out endlessly. Thinking briefly, he immediately rushed towards the sound of Bien Ho's scolding. As soon as he approached the fake mountain, seeing that Bien Ho was still holding out, he turned to another direction, then suddenly stopped, thinking, "I don't know who belongs to Bok Dak Mon. How can we distinguish between friends and enemies?" Thinking so, he turned back and decided to secretly help Bien Ho. Seeing an old tree not far away, he did not hesitate and immediately jumped up to a high branch to observe. Down there, The incomparably brave Bien Ho was in a fierce battle with two sword-wielding men, not yet in a defeated position. But looking at all four directions, the fire and smoke rising to the sky, it was clear that the 100 Dogmon had been defeated, and now there was only so much that could be resisted. Without hesitation, Kim Fai broke a few tree branches, pulled out more than a dozen small pieces hidden in his sleeve, then threw them out at the two big men one by one. The other two guys were tired of fighting with Bien Ho when they suddenly heard the wind whistling behind them and shouted angrily, "Damn!" Before they could finish scolding, they fell to the ground, just as Bien Ho's hammer fell, blood splashed, and they died on the spot. After killing two enemies, Bien Ho was stunned for a moment and then said softly, "Thank you." Then he immediately rushed in another direction. This time, the people who were ordered by gang leader Thiat Hong to attack Bak Dak Mon were all subordinates of Bang Sai Duong, each of them extremely cruel. As soon as they set foot in the cave, they slaughtered indiscriminately, a scene so dire they could not bear to see. The head of Bang Sai Hall is leader of Bang Sai Truan, over 60 years old, with a thin body, a pockmarked face, and a pair of serrated hands that look extremely fierce. Since the previous sect master Van Dak then passenger Thuan Vu Kuang was pushed into Lang Hu Valley, its power has become increasingly weaker and its numbers are sparse. A prestigious sect, today was beaten to pieces by a faction. It is truly a humiliation that is hard to put into words. But even the 9 major sects did not dare to provoke the Thiat Hong gang, so how could the other small sects withstand them? I saw Bien Ho carrying a big hammer and rushing straight into the place where the screams of killing resounded. As he advanced, he cut down many of Bang Sai's subordinates. The deeper he went inside, the more Kim Fai saw houses. Every house was on fire, mixed with pitiful screams, which sounded horrifying. Suddenly a house was about to collapse, and from inside there was a scream. Bien Ho immediately shouted loudly, "Brother Luke! Bien Ho is here." Having finished speaking, he swung the hammer, ignoring the danger, rushing straight into the shaking house. Behind the house, a big man wearing a gray cloth, his whole body covered in blood, holding a long sword in his left hand, was fighting hard with 4 skinny men in black clothes. That person's right arm was severed, and blood flowed from the wound like a stream. Bien Ho shouted loudly, "Those bitches! The beggar has arrived." As he spoke, he swung his hammer and slashed straight at the other 4 men. The 4 great men in black are not ordinary people. The oldest middle-aged man smiled coldly. "Huh!" Another person came to surrender his life. When the gray-clothed man saw Bien Ho appear, his spirit was completely buoyed and he tried to shout, "Junior brother! Quickly, master is on the main street." Seeing this, Kim Fai clearly understood that if he did not appear, today the Bak Dak Mon would be completely destroyed. At this time, Bien Ho and his brother Luke fought against 4 great men in black. Not daring to hesitate, Kim Fai immediately pulled out a white scarf to cover her face, raised her hand behind her to pull out the Kim Huk divine sword. Golden light flashed in her eyes, dancing and shouting loudly, "Thiat Hong gang brats! Your end has come." Before he finished speaking, he rushed straight into battle. Kim Huk's divine sword was indeed powerful. A black-clothed man, upon seeing the golden sword's light, immediately cried out in panic, "Quickly withdraw!" Kim Huk ordered the master. As soon as he turned around to run, he only took 2 steps when he screamed miserably. His head was cut in half by the golden sword, and he fell down dead on the spot. When Bien Ho and his brother Luke saw that scene, they were both stunned. Immediately afterwards, the miserable screams rang out again and again, fresh blood and severed limbs splashed, and the remaining 3 black-clad men were all killed in the blink of an eye. While Bien Ho was still surprised, several miserable screams rang out consecutively, startling him like someone suddenly waking up from a dream. Quickly turning his head to look back, he saw a white shadow rushing towards him. Only then did he realize that it was a rider in a white shirt with a white scarf covering his face. Looking closely, he suddenly realized that this person was extremely familiar, but for a moment he couldn't remember where he had seen him. Little did he know that it was the handsome young man he had just encountered a moment ago. Still in doubt, Kim Fi took out 2 pills and gave them to the great man Luke, saying, "Take 2 of these pills, then find a place to practice 3,000 cycles and you will be cured immediately." Having finished speaking, he turned to ask Bien Ho, "Where is the main road?" Bien Ho hesitated for a moment, then pointed forward. Over there, over there." Kim Fi asked again, "Does Bok Dak Mon's uniform have any distinguishing marks?" Bien Ho shook his head. "Nothing special." The great man of the Luke family suddenly bowed to Kim Fi and said earnestly, "Tutor Dunan is in a fierce battle with Bang Sai Hall Master Truan in the main hall. Please come to the rescue quickly." "I am extremely grateful." Kim Fi nodded. "Okay, let's go now." Having finished speaking, he walked around the burning house and headed straight towards the main road. Bien Ho clasped his hands and bowed to his senior brother. "Senior brother, stay and rest. I'll go ahead and see the situation." Having finished speaking, he carried the big hammer and rushed towards the main street. Brother Luke sighed and muttered, "Junior brother is truly a rare talent, but unfortunately, hey." As for Kim Fi, he went straight into the largest house. Inside there were screams of killing and killing. Along the way, corpses were lying everywhere, limbs broken, blood flowing freely, a scene so pitiful that one could not bear to look at it. Coming to the main street, he saw both sides fighting fiercely. Standing and observing for a moment, he suddenly heard screams and screams coming from afar. He immediately knew that Bien Ho had arrived and was risking his life to fight the enemy. But right now, his eyes were still glued to the 2 people fighting fiercely in front. One was an old woodcutter about 60 years old, holding an old firewood hammer. The other person was also about the same age, but his body was thin and small. His hands were holding a pair of deformed weapons, shining silver, full of cold serrated teeth. The 2 fought fiercely, their strength was equal, each move was incredibly powerful. Kim Fi stood and observed for a while and then guessed that those 2 people must be Dunan and Truan. On the surface, the match looks like children's play, but in fact it is an extremely profound battle of strength and intelligence. Every attack uses all of its internal energy. As soon as they see the opponent make a move, they immediately know whether that move can be broken or not. If it is neutralized, they must immediately change the move to continue attacking. Because of such a battle of strength and intelligence, the internal strength of both is consumed extremely greatly. After watching for a while, Kim Fi thought to himself, "It's strange. Outside the cave, I saw many people poisoned. I thought Bok Dak Mon would use poison to deal with it, but when we got here, did their poison lose its effectiveness?" While he was thinking, he suddenly heard a shout, "Bien Ho is here." Bien Ho swung his protective hammer and rushed straight in. An old man in a red shirt, holding a pair of judge's pens, smiled faintly and immediately rushed out to fight. At that time, Dunan was forced to take 2 steps back because his mind was distracted, clearly unable to resist. Seeing that, Kim Fi immediately swung his sword, let out a long scream, his body rushed forward like an arrow, and shouted loudly, "Stop it!" Before he finished speaking, the person arrived. The event happened so suddenly that everyone present was frightened, immediately stopped, and stepped aside. Only Dunan and Truan are still fighting with each other. Kim Fi smiled faintly and walked over to stand next to him. Both were extremely worried, not knowing whether the person who had just appeared was an assistant or an enemy. The screams and shouts from earlier still echoed, enough to show that that person's power was unfathomably deep, making them even more wary. Among the crowd, only a few recognized that the sword Kim Fi was holding was the Kim Huk divine sword, so they whispered. Especially Dunan and Truan, even though they were fighting desperately, their eyes still kept glancing around. When they saw the Kim Huk divine sword in his hand, both of them were secretly scared, afraid that if this person helped the other person, the situation would become extremely dangerous. Suddenly, Truan gritted his teeth, pursed his lips, and used all his strength to force a blow. Dunan let out a soft huff sound, the hammer in his hand gradually lowered, his face turned red. He tried his best to lift the hammer again. The 2 of them used all their strength, sweat poured down their foreheads like rain. The men of both sides stood around, holding their breath, staring wide-eyed, silently thinking. At this time, if anyone wants to come to the rescue, their strength must surpass that of Du Nan and Truan to be able to solve it. Otherwise, that person will be seriously injured. But if you let the two continue to fight like this, sooner or later someone will die from exhaustion. Therefore, no one dared to interfere. Everyone just stood still and watched. While everyone was still unclear about who won and who lost, Kim Fai clearly saw that the Bogdak Mon Sek's Grand Master was in an inferior position and could only struggle to defend. He whispered, "I don't know if I can solve this fight with my strength. Moreover, I have completely recovered now. If his power is only slightly better than one person's, it is still not enough to intervene. Unless he can suppress both, then he can act." While thinking, he suddenly heard soft footsteps behind him. Turning his head to look back, it turned out to be Bien Ho. He stood behind, looking at him pleadingly. Kim Fai asked softly, "Are you worried about your master?" Bien Ho nodded and replied softly, "Yes." Having finished speaking, he looked at the arena again with a look of panic. Kim Fai originally had sympathy for this young man, and seeing him so worried also moved his heart. However, he still had doubts in his heart. Bien Ho's martial arts were not ordinary, but when fighting, sometimes he could perform brilliant moves, and other times he was unusually clumsy. Could it be that he only received a few discrete generations of teachings from an expert? Bien Ho thought Kim Fai refused to take action, so he tightened his grip on the hammer, a fierce look on his face, intending to risk his life to rush in to save his master, then quietly walked straight towards the arena. Seeing that, Kim Fai quickly spoke, "Wait." Everyone just had time to see a white shadow and a flash of yellow light, and at the same time, there was a gentle stream of energy blocking Bien Ho's path. Immediately after that, a white shadow with a dazzling golden sword light appeared in the middle of the arena. Just heard a loud clanging sound, the figure flashed, then followed by a rumbling sound, filled with dust and sand. The two figures fighting were suddenly shaken and retreated 8 meters. All those present shivered in horror. Waiting for the two silhouettes to stand firmly, everyone realized that they were Du Nan and Truan, each occupying a side, silently controlling their energy. In the middle of the arena, where the two had just fought, a white shadow stood tall. Waiting for everyone to calm down, that white shadow raised his right hand and shouted loudly, "Du Nan, Grand Master of Bogdak Sect, listen here." Only then did everyone see clearly that it was a rider in a white shirt, his face covered with a white scarf. In his raised right hand was a purple bamboo card, delicately carved, the command talisman of Van Dak then Passenger Thuan Vu Kuang. The previous Grand Master of Bogdak Mon still carried with him. As soon as the Bogdak sect disciples saw the order, they immediately knelt down and worshipped. As for Du Nan, he bowed his back, clasped his hands, and replied loudly, "Junior Doc Tam Tu Tu Du Nan would like to respectfully give orders." Kim Fai raised his voice. This person, following the orders of Senior Thuan Vu, returned the amulets to the nobles, and at the same time assisted the nobles in destroying the enemy invaders. Having finished speaking, he waved his hand and threw the bamboo card. The purple talisman turned into a streak of dark light, flying straight in front of Du Nan. Bogdak ordered to return. Bogdak Mon's disciples were overjoyed. The cheers echoed throughout the whole area. The reason is that the Bogdak sect has a rule passed down by the founder of Kai Sun. If the Bogdak order is lost, all disciples are forbidden from using poison. That charter originally had a profound meaning, but later no one explained it clearly, so almost no one understood it. Du Nan reached out to receive Bogdak's command and said loudly, "Many thanks." Suddenly, Truan let out a long, pitiful scream, followed by screams of killing from all directions. He immediately threw out 2 round, silvery objects, straight at Kim Fai's face. Kim Fai smiled faintly, pulled down the veil, and coldly shouted, "Any stupid person who isn't afraid of death can just rush forward." At the same time, his left hand knocked away 2 silver balls to the side, and his right hand pulled out the magical sword Kim Huk. Everyone only heard the sound of clashing weapons and the whistling sound of the wind. His body rushed straight to attack Truan. At that moment, people from both sides rushed to kill fiercely. Truan's martial arts skills are truly powerful, and the pair of misshapen and serrated weapons in his hands are even more dangerous. Every time he dances, wind and rain seem unable to get through. Every time he rushed forward to attack, his weapons aimed at more than a dozen vital points of King Fai, but the response was thousands of dazzling golden sword lights counterattacking. The two fought for nearly 20 rounds. King Fai suddenly burst into laughter and said, "Truan, today the Order Master spares your life. Pass the word back to Ta Fong. This Mid-Autumn Festival, this Order Master will make an agreement with Mac Fu." Truan smiled faintly. "Don't brag, kid. Today next year." Before he finished speaking, the divine sword Kim Huk stabbed straight in front of him. Truan was frightened, quickly took a step back, raised his weapons to cover his face, but it was too late. Only heard a few pitiful oops sounds, blood spurted out like rain, an arm and a silver deformed weapon were cut off, flying more than 10 feet away. Immediately afterwards, the white shadow and the sacred sword Kim Huk rushed straight into the crowd. Wherever King Fai went, miserable screams rang out, blood shot out like showers, broken limbs flew in all directions. The Thiat Hom gang broke their formation and fled like water bursting its banks. As for Truan, his face turned pale, his body staggered a few times, then he sat down on the ground, closing his eyes to control his breathing. Blood flowed from his left arm like a stream. He quickly put his palm to the vital point to stop the bleeding, gritted his teeth and let out a pitiful scream, then struggled to stand up and hastily fled. In just a blink of an eye, the Thiat Hom gang all followed Truan and fled, scattering and retreating. Du Nan, the head of Bokdok sect, immediately raised his hand and shot out a few streams of blue fire as a signal. When the Bokdok sect disciples saw this, they immediately stopped chasing and killing. Bien Ho, covered in blood, ran in front of King Fai and knelt down to worship. King Fai quickly raised his hand to help, smiled and asked, "What is Uncle Bien doing?" Bien Ho only felt a strong force lifting him up straight. Even if he wanted to, he couldn't continue kneeling. He was so embarrassed that his face turned red, and for a long time he faltered and said, "Senior Deng, please forgive this junior." Suddenly, King Fai smiled and replied, "Not knowing is not a crime." At that time, the scene in the cup was terrible. Everywhere were injured people screaming and moaning. Under the flickering firelight, although the Thiat Hom gang had withdrawn, Bokdok Mon's inheritance had been severely damaged. Du Nan immediately ordered his disciples to temporarily clean up and lightly repair everywhere, then invited King Fai to an intact house to rest and drink water. King Fai humbly refused. "I still have urgent work to do. I have to go now. I'll come back to pay my respects once I'm done." Having finished speaking, he took out the book of monologues and the relics that Van Dock the passenger had entrusted to him and handed them back to Du Nan. Du Nan was extremely moved. He trembled and received the relics of the previous Grand Master. Tears flowed endlessly. He choked up and said, "Bokdok Mon was helped by Dang Dai Heap. We will forever remember this kindness. In the future, no matter what the hero orders, even if we have to rush into fierce fire, we will not dare to give up." King Fai quickly waved his hand and replied, "Brother, you, don't say that. In the future, if I need help, I will count on you to help me." Du Nan pondered for a moment and then continued, "From now on, Bokdok Mon and the Wanderer will again be a true Bokdok Mon." At that moment, Bien Ho suddenly knelt down in front of Du Nan, looking like he was pleading. Du Nan let out a soft "oh" sound, turned to King Fai and said, "There is one thing I want to ask you, sir. I don't know if you will be willing to accept." Chapter 23. Visiting the Three Lakes. Seeing this situation, King Fai already had a guess in his heart, so he nodded and replied, "Master, if you have anything to advise, please say it." Du Nan looked at Bien Ho and asked, "How does Dang Dai Hu see the little boy Bien Ho?" King Fai replied, "His qualities and physical strength are both top class." Du Nan was overjoyed when he heard that and quickly continued, "He is an orphan, both of his parents were murdered. When his father was still alive, He once entrusted him to him, but he knew that he was not qualified to be a master. So he did not dare to teach him many basic martial arts, so he only let him practice a few family martial arts, waiting for the opportunity to follow another famous master. Having said that, he paused for a moment and then continued. Just now, he saw that Dang Dai Hu's martial arts skills were miraculous and absolutely perfect. He was truly an outstanding master of his time. So he took the liberty of asking the great hero to accept this boy as his disciple. I wonder if the great hero would be pleased. Kim Fai pondered for a moment and then replied, "Okay." Du Nan was happy to hear that and immediately called Bien Ho. "Bien Ho, quickly come here to pay your respects to the master." Bien Ho was indescribably happy, quickly ran to bow to Kim Fai, and loudly said, "Master! Master, please accept my disciple's bow." Kim Fai nodded slightly. "Okay, get up." Du Nan immediately told the disciple standing nearby, "Hurry up and prepare the incense table for the monk worship ceremony." Kim Fai shook his head and said, "No need. We must leave now." Second tiger, follow master. Du Nan tried to hold on but couldn't, so he and his disciples sent the two teachers and students out of the mountain valley, saying, "On Mid-Autumn Festival, we Bok Dak Mon will definitely be present at Mo Fu Mountain, waiting for instructions from Dang Dai Heap." Kim Fai repeatedly thanked him, then led Bien Ho to leave immediately. At the foot of Chung Nam Mountain, a yellow sand road curves like a long snake, running from east to west. At that time, at the far end of the eastern road, dust and sand were everywhere. Two horsemen galloped quickly, and in the blink of an eye they stopped at the foot of the mountain. The rider on the left is wearing a white Ao dai and has a handsome scholarly appearance. The person on the right has dark skin, a beard, a muscular body, and the majestic aura of a young warrior. As soon as they arrived, the two immediately reined in the horse to stand still. The young man on the right raised his head and asked, "Master, should we let the horse run free and then walk up the mountain?" The white-shirted scholar nodded, smiled, and replied, "You are tired already, aren't you?" The burly teenager laughed loudly. "It's only been 7 days and 7 nights. Ho Ni is still very healthy. What's more, along the way, the master taught me internal mind techniques, and Ho Ni felt that he had improved a lot." It turned out that the two people were Kim Fai and Bien Ho, all the way from Chao Lutsong's son to Chung Nam. Along the way, Kim Fai enthusiastically taught internal mind techniques, and used his true power to help Bien Ho unclog Nam Dak's 2 veins, and at the same time taught him many strange martial arts. Bien Ho had natural strength and intelligence, but now he received guidance from a famous master, so his skills improved dramatically. Nam Dak has mastered and learned martial arts more and more quickly. Seeing this, Kim Fai was overjoyed and smiled and said, "If Ho Ni tries harder, one day his strength will definitely reach a supernatural level." Bien Ho's face turned red, but he was unspeakably happy as he smiled and replied, "Master is so praising." Kim Fai continued, "Come on, let's leave our horses here and try our luck at flying." Bien Ho blushed even more and hesitantly replied, "The tiger does not dare." Kim Fai laughed. "It's okay, master, let me go ahead." Having finished speaking, Kim Fai softly shouted, "Go!" He waved his hand and pushed Bien Ho forward. Borrowing that momentum, Bien Ho immediately used all his effort, running and calling, "Master, tiger is 1 step ahead." Before he finished speaking, his figure had already jumped more than 10 feet away, and in the blink of an eye, he had become a small shadow in the distance. Seeing this, Kim Fai nodded and muttered, "What a talent worth teaching." Having finished speaking, he also used light weight to chase after him immediately. According to the map, Kim Fai clearly knew the location of Bich Ba Lake, so he just went straight in that direction. It turns out that Bich Ba Lake is located deep in the middle of the Chung Nam mountain range. According to the hunter, around the lake there are more than 20 households, living by fishing and hunting, and rarely go out of the mountains. According to that person, from the foot of Chung Nam Mountain to Bich Ba Lake it takes 10 days. Along the way is a dense forest, covered with snow all year round, and full of wild animals. If it weren't for a young hunter venturing deep into the dark forest a few years ago, outsiders would never have known that such a lake was hidden in the mountain. That hunter was lost for more than a month before finally returning home. However, he only stayed one night and then the whole family quietly moved away. No one knew his whereabouts. Only his maternal side did not move. Before leaving, the hunter secretly told his biological parents not to miss him or reveal this story to outsiders. However, 2 days after his family disappeared, his wife's parents told everyone that there was a very prosperous place in the mountain, but because they didn't know the way, no one dared to find it. They also added that the people who live there are extremely ferocious and can only come in if they welcome them. Otherwise, they will lose their lives if they trespass. Therefore, even if there are curious people who want to go, no one dares to take the risk. Kim Phi and Bien Ho inquired carefully, compared the map with the map, found it completely consistent, so they prepared dry food and entered the mountain together. The two teachers and students ran continuously, at least over 100 miles. Bien Ho ran for a while, but didn't see Kim Phi keeping up, so he slowed down and muttered, "How strange. Why can't I see my teacher? Could something have happened?" As soon as he finished speaking, a hand was placed on his shoulder, and Kim Phi's gentle voice rang out in his ear. "Are your feelings that bad? Master has been following you for half a day and still doesn't know. In the future, when you go out to the rivers and lakes, how will you deal with strong enemies? Why should I worry about my master?" Bien Ho was startled and quickly replied, "Master's power is much higher than mine. How can people in the Jianghu compare with their master? If everyone was as powerful as the master, how could Ho Ni dare step foot into the world?" Kim Phi smiled and said, "Very clever to resist. Let's see if I can still say that in the future." Having finished speaking, he raised his hand to point at the vital point on Bien Ho's shoulder, but he laughed and jumped away to avoid it. The two teachers and students walked, laughing and talking, and soon entered deep into the mountains and forests. But after a full day's journey, I still didn't see any trace of Bitch Ba Ho. Kim Phi thought to himself as he walked, "Strange. Such a big lake, why can't I find it? What's more, I still have a map in my hand." That night, the two teachers and students rested in a cave. The next morning, follow the map and continue deeper into the forest. On the way, whenever they encounter wild animals, they either chase them away or capture them for food. The sun had just set, and by the evening of the second day, the two of them searched forever before finding a cave to rest. With their strength, whether they rest or not is not important, but in the dark, on mountain roads, it is difficult to distinguish traces. And Kim Phi also wants to teach martial arts to Bien Ho, hoping he will improve soon. In the middle of the wild mountains, the roar of tigers and wolves howling from afar makes people's hearts tremble. The two teachers and students sat facing each other in the cave, when suddenly a tragic howl rang out not far away. Immediately after that, another long howl responded, like someone calling someone to answer. Two mournful howls were heard for dozens of miles, then all around suddenly fell silent, as if all the animals in the mountain were afraid of that wolf. Bien Ho opened his eyes slightly, shivered and said, "This howl makes the disciples goosebumps." Kim Phi also felt uneasy, nodded and replied, "I don't know what kind of wolf it is, but its howling sound is so scary." Bien Ho lifted the big hammer weighing 300 pounds and continued, "Master, let Uni go out and kill them in peace." At that moment, the wolf howl rang out again, deafening and deafening. Kim Phi said softly, "No need. This type of wolf must be extremely cruel. If it follows a herd, it will be extremely troublesome." Finally, that terrifying night passed. Kim Phi doesn't know what breed of wolves out there are, but just hearing the howl sounds even more terrifying than gray wolves or snow wolves. Therefore, the next morning, when the sky had cleared and the howling was no longer there, the two teachers and students dared to leave the cave, following the map and continuing towards Bitch Ba Lake. Day after day, one afternoon, the two climbed to the top of a towering mountain. Kim Phi looked down at the foot of the mountain and saw a vast expanse of grass, green like a velvet carpet, looking extremely beautiful. At the end of that vast lawn appeared a lake so large that the other shore could not be seen. Along the lake is a row of quite crowded houses. In front of each house are anchored more than 10 fishing boats. From the lake, the singing of the fishing boats that had just returned was soft and refreshing, making this place truly a place of paradise in the middle of the world. Kim Fai looked at that peaceful scene and couldn't help but silently praise the swordsman Bitch Ba for having sharp eyes to find such a wonderful retreat. Bien Ho stood looking for a moment and then said softly, "Master, this place is so good. If I could live here in the future, I would be so happy." Kim Fai happily nodded and thought to himself, could it be that Bitch Ba swordsman's clan consists of just over 20 households? If so, the power of the Bitch Ba swordsman clan in the past probably wasn't great, but considering Bitch Ba swordsman's martial arts skills, the clan he founded is probably no less than anyone else. Actually, that thought is both right and wrong. In the past, when the Bitch Ba gang appeared on the streets, the gang's subordinates covered their faces wherever they went and acted extremely cruelly. People in the world only know of a gang dressed in white, riding black horses, wearing a wolf mask, looking extremely ferocious, with mysterious movements, appearing ghostly and in a trance. That state called itself a revenge army, so the wanderers called them the Revenge Envoy. Very few people knew their real name or background. Therefore, Kim Fai's initial assessment was both correct and wrong. The two teachers and students stood on the top of the mountain watching for a long time, then slowly descended the mountain and headed straight into the small village. At that time, Kim Fai was certain that this was the residence of the Cat Bitch Ba swordsman of the past. Observing closely, he realized that more than 20 houses in the village were all built according to the Bitch Ba flag formation created by Bitch Ba swordsmen. If outsiders are not proficient in the formation, once they get in, it will be difficult to get out. Kim Fai led Bien Ho through the village gate. After walking about a dozen meters, he saw a muscular young man, dressed in rustic clothes, coming forward to greet him. Kim Fai quickly clasped his hands in ceremony and asked, "Sir, where is Ho Van Sin's house?" The young man was slightly surprised, looked at him intently for a long time. His face looked unhappy, but his voice remained polite. "I wonder why you are looking for Ho Van Sin." Kim Fai smiled and replied, "A friend asked me to come here to find Ho Van Sin and send a few words." The young man observed him again for a moment and then said, "We invite you to follow us." His voice and expression were cold and a bit arrogant. Seeing this, Bien Ho was somewhat annoyed, but seeing that Kim Fai was still leisurely, he did not dare to attack, so he just quietly followed behind with his hammer and headed straight into the middle of the village. After walking some distance, the teenager stopped in front of a house. Kim Fai looked and saw that the house had very simple architecture. The door faced a large lake, and in front of the water bank were anchored 2 fishing boats that looked very unusual. On the shore, an old man with white hair and beard was closing his eyes and smoking a pipe. The young man walked up to the old man, as if afraid of alarming him, so he softly called out, "Sir." The old man said yes and then replied, "Are you going there?" His voice was resounding and unusually powerful. If one hadn't seen it with one's own eyes, it would be hard to believe that an old man with a frail appearance could have such a strong voice. The young man continued softly, "Sir, someone is coming to see you." The old man said oh and asked, "Who is that? Is it the person in the lake?" The teenager shook his head and replied, "Sir, no." The old man took another deep drag of his cigarette and continued, "Are you from the village?" Having finished speaking, he exhaled a puff of smoke, looking leisurely. The teenager replied, "Sir, no, it's an outsider." The old man suddenly opened his eyes wide, his eyes shining like electricity, looking intently at Kim Fai. That sharp look startled both Kim Fai and Bien Ho. They did not expect an ordinary-looking old man to have such profound powers. The old man coldly humphed and shouted at the young man, "I stand aside." The young man bowed his head and then stepped aside. "That old man is Ho Van Sin." The old man coldly observed Kim Fai and Bien Ho for a moment, then asked in a low voice, "The old man is Ho Van Sin. Who introduced you two here?" Kim Fai smiled and replied, "This is Deng Kim Fai and his disciple Bien Ho." The old man immediately interrupted. The old man didn't ask for their names. Seeing that he was disrespectful to his master, Bien Ho shouted loudly, "That old man! How dare you be disrespectful to my master?" As he spoke, he swung the hammer around. The young man standing next to Ho Van Sin saw this and became angry and shouted, "Do you dare come here to cause trouble?" Before he finished speaking, he quickly bowed to Ho Van Sin and asked, "Sir, please allow Fong Mi to tie up this arrogant dog." Before Ho Van Sin could answer, Kim Fai smiled and shouted softly, "Tiger, step aside." Having finished speaking, he stepped forward and asked seriously, "Ho Van Sin, do you entertain guests like that?" Ho Van Sin laughed and said, "Unexpectedly, a young boy would dare to speak up and teach the old man." As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a swoosh sound, and a sharp wind spear shot straight at the flag point in front of Kim Fai's chest. Kim Fai slid to the side to avoid it, smiled faintly and said, "Ho Van Sin, as usual, I still have to give you 3 moves." Ho Fong, who stood nearby, heard this and shouted angrily, "It really makes me angry." Having finished speaking, he jumped forward to attack Kim Fai, but Ho Van Sin coldly shouted, "Fong Mi, step aside." As soon as he finished speaking, Ho Van Sin wielded his 2 palms like the wind and directly attacked Kim Fai. Wanting to test the opponent's strength, Kim Fai immediately used his true strength and raised his palms to welcome him. Bop! There was a resounding sound, sand and dust flew, the ground where the 2 exchanged palms sunk into a deep hole. Ho Van Sin's face turned red and he took 3 steps back, while Kim Fai still stood in place, his body not moving at all. As soon as he stood firm, Ho Van Sin let out a loud scream, waved his palms and rushed forward to attack again. At the same time, Ho Fong also swung his fist and hit Bien Ho straight in the chest, shouting, "Kid, I'll give you a few moves too." Bien Ho angrily replied, "What are you? If you're good, pull out your weapons." Ho Fong spread his arms and grinned, "I don't even bother using weapons." Bien Ho immediately threw the hammer to the ground, only to hear a swoosh sound. The hammer blade penetrated deeply into the ground, leaving only the handle. He rolled up his sleeves and shouted, "Okay. Come here. I also use my double fist to receive you." Ho Fong coldly humphed and immediately threw a punch straight at Bien Ho's chest. Bien Ho said "oh wow" a few times and then laughed loudly. "Ah, this kid also has skills. When you say fight, do you attack right away?" Having finished speaking, he swung his fists to counterattack. Immediately, the 4 people divided into 2 pairs and fought fiercely. At that moment, someone appeared from all 4 directions, quickly heading straight towards the fighting place. You just finished listening, Volume 4, of the series, Ancient Swordplay. The Divine Palm appeared. Please comment your feelings after listening to the story, and don't forget to subscribe to hear the latest stories.